from other parts. So going into the lumbar nerves. Okay, the lumbar vertebrae are from L1 to L5, and this is where we carry most of the body weight. Okay, so most of the injuries are going to be in this area. They're subject to the largest amount of force and stress along the spine. So the spinal cord ends in the L1, L2 area, but there are still nerves in the rest of the lumbar area. And the nerves of the lumbar spine control the lower body, the hips, the thighs, the legs, and the feet, because again, that's close to where those parts of the body are. So most cases, it's pretty intuitive. Going to the next slide. Okay, so here we have another picture of the lumbar nerves. And I have this picture here just because there's a very famous nerve here. Let's see if you can identify. It's the largest nerve in the body, and it starts in between L1 and L5, and it goes all the way to the tips of the toes. It's the largest nerve in the body. It's the sciatic nerve. Okay, so because this is where most of the body weight is supported, a lot of people have problems here. If you're going to have a herniated disc in the back, 9 times out of 10 it's in this area. Okay, so what happens in the case of a herniated disc? Okay, so a herniated disc means that the layers of the discs, it's kind of like an onion. Yeah, there's many layers of the disc, and either by repetitive bad movement or by some sort of trauma, those layers break open and the liquid inside of the disc comes out. Okay, if that happens, that's a herniated disc, and the broken layers and the liquid coming out is going to create a potential real problem. And I wanted to bring up one thing here. Okay, so let's imagine we have person A and person B. Okay, they have the exact same hernia in the exact same location. Okay, they both have a hernia in L5. Okay, and person A feels pain all the time, and person B does not feel pain ever, doesn't even know they have a herniated disc, but it's the exact same herniated disc. How can this be? I want you to think about it for a minute. How could it be? Exact same hernia, exact same location, one person has pain, the other doesn't. Okay, so the answer is that person A has a strong inflammatory response and person B doesn't. Because it's not the hernia that actually hurts. The disc itself doesn't have nerve endings. So it's more if the broken layers of the cushion in between the spine and the liquid coming out, if that causes enough inflammation that it presses on any of the peripheral nerves, it's going to result in pain. And the other person, they have a really low inflammatory response, and their nerve doesn't get compressed by this inflammation. Okay, so that's a huge factor when it comes to having pain associated with a spinal injury. So it's important to talk about this too, because there are other ways of treating spinal injury through diet that works to lower inflammation. Not just asana and pranayama and meditation, but also mitrahara, which is diet. You'll talk about this in when you get into the Ayurveda section of the training. But yeah, you can also recommend a student of yours if they're telling you they have a lot of pain in their back. It could also be the inflammations that you can address through diet. But not to get too sidetracked on that there, just it's a common problem, and I did want to talk about it because if there is inflammation here and it's enough, if it's inflamed enough, it can put pressure on this sciatic nerve and people get what's called sciatica. So they might end up with pain all the way down their leg and even into their feet. And in severe cases, they might have loss of sensation in the toes or in the leg. Usually it's like a pulsating pain. And that's because the inflammation in the vertebra is pushing on that nerve and the electrical impulses are being interrupted. So a bit of a side note there, but interesting to talk about when it comes to inflammation with the nerves. So, okay, going into what the different nerves do in the lumbar spine, we said that, L1 to L5, that is going to control the lower body. It's going to control the digestive processes, also the bladder, the sexual organs, the low back, all of these things. Those are what the nerve innervates. Then possible symptoms, constipation, diarrhea, any kind of IBS or any problem with the digestive system. Then we also have, menstrual problems, menopause, infertility, low sex drive, anything to do with your sexual organs would be also in this area. And that's more the lower part of the lumbar and the sacrum actually as well. So because the sacrum does, even though it doesn't have movement, it does have nerves. So it does have some movement, but I should say it doesn't have as much movement. It does have nerves that do control things. So let's use that as our example. Okay, so if we're having a problem with infertility, either yourself or someone you know or a student of yours comes to you, we've been trying to get pregnant for so long and it's not happening, do you have any advice? Okay, well, yoga asana as well as meditation and pranayama have been pretty proven to help with this because it increases the prana, it increases the proper functioning of all of the systems of the body, including your endocrine system, which is what controls your sexual reproduction. So you could prescribe specific asanas that are going to be helping to increase the flow of energy there. You can do chakra meditations that work on the subtle energy in those areas. There's a whole variety of things, right? So that's just one example from the lumbar spine. I do want to give you a word of caution when it comes to, diagnosing someone. Unless you are a doctor, you don't want to actually diagnose someone with something. You can't just say, oh, you're having infertility problems? Well, you have a herniated L5. Okay, no. It doesn't work that way because the thing is that the peripheral nervous system is all interrelated. So although we can say, you're having digestive problems, maybe there's something going on in your lumbar spine. That doesn't say with 100% certainty that that is what the problem is, because all of the nerves can communicate with each other. So maybe it's your thyroid that's affecting your metabolism and your endocrine system, and that's in the C1, that's eventually affecting how you digest. So because it's a global system, you can't, diagnosis isn't as simple as we're kind of making it out to be, yeah? So when someone comes to me as a yoga teacher with a physical problem, I do say, well, it could be this. You might want to try, gentle exercises to increase the mobility of this area. You might want to do this pranayama, you might want to do this meditation, but then the best tool that I have is the number to a chiropractor, a regular doctor, a psychologist, and an acupuncturist. Okay, so I can give them, somewhat of an educated understanding, but I'm not going to treat anyone because I know I'm not a doctor. I will give them the number of someone who I know knows more than me. Yeah, so that's a specialist in whatever area. So it's important to take that seriously because we need to be responsible as teachers, and we need to realize that although we as yoga teachers will have a understanding of how the global body works together, we also would never want to harm someone by saying, oh yeah, just do a lot of twisted postures, you'll be fine. And then they're not, right? So always, always, always recommend them to a specialist. But having said that, in your own personal practice too, if you're suffering from any of these symptoms, you might start to think of it in a different way. Like, okay, if I increase my flexibility and movement in this area, maybe I can help with X, Y, or Z. Yeah, and kind of using it as one of the tools in your toolkit, but also yourself, if you are having any sort of an issue, don't not go to a specialist. The specialists are there for a reason, so we definitely want to be responsible in that regard. So moving on. So kind of sticking with this idea of being careful when it comes to diagnoses, because it's like a global system, I wanted to propose you the question, what is a plexus? I'm sure you've heard, if you've been in the yoga world for a while, the solar plexus. But what exactly is a plexus? Do you know? Give you a second just to think about it there, and then we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so, well, the solar plexus in particular is also called the celiac plexus and is a complex system of radiating nerves and ganglia. It's found in the pit of the stomach and in the front of the aorta. It's part of the sympathetic nervous system, and it plays an important role in the functioning of the stomach, kidneys, liver, and adrenal glands. So remember at the beginning we were talking about the stomach brain and the heart brain, and how there's so many neurons and neurotransmitters, and it's such a hub of activity. Well, also because there are so many different pairs of nerves that come together in this area, is why it's able to communicate so powerfully with the mind. Okay, so when I think about a plexus, I think of like a roundabout when it comes to driving. It's where many roads come together. So you can see several different pairs of nerves here coming in, and a lot of the origin of these are coming from locations that are not close to it in location. I usually say that it's mostly intuitive, yeah, like the cervical spine controls the neck because it's located near it. So that's the case most of the time, but when it comes to the plexus, it's not always the case because then you have many different things plugging into it. And so that's another reason why we have to be careful, because when it comes to, digestive issues, well, there's so much going on there that you don't really know that it's in the lumbar spine, right? It could be coming from the thoracic spine or even the cervical spine. So it's important to keep that in mind, that, it is global, and we can kind of have an idea, but we need to also take into account that there are some really highly innervated areas like the stomach and like the heart. that have a lot more going into it than it might seem at first. So just wanted to take that into account, and also to say that there are other plexuses as well, not just the heart and in the stomach, but also there's some in the legs, where near where the sciatic nerve is. There's many nerves that come together there too. So just keep that in mind. Okay, going on now. So we have talked about all of the spinal nerves, but there are also cranial nerves. Okay, so there's 12 cranial nerves, and one of them is very important, and we're just going to talk about that one. Okay, we're not going to get into all of the different nerves. We're going to talk about the 10th cranial nerve, and that is called the vagus nerve. So if you have been in the yoga world for a while, you might have heard of this one. It's a very famous nerve. And let's look here. A picture of the vagus nerve. It kind of starts like behind the ear, and it goes all the way down to the chest. Okay? And the reason why this nerve is so important is because it directly deals with the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, we're going to look at the divisions of the central nervous system but in a minute, but just to say quickly, the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of the body that is responsible for relaxing. And so it's important that the vagus nerve is working properly so that the body can relax when it's meant to relax, right? And there are many things in yoga that we do that can stimulate the vagus nerve. And I was just wondering if you could try to think right now of what would you say to someone who wants to work on the vagus nerve? Maybe you could say an asana that has the drishti to parsva, so gazing to the side. An asana that has a gaze to the side, so they're turning their head. Or we could say, neck rolls, that would be stimulating this. But on a more subtle level, I would like to suggest something else. That if you have read the Yoga Sutras, or if you've been to any yoga class, I'm sure you know about this. Okay, one more subtle thing that we can do to activate the vagus nerve, and what I'm thinking of here is chanting Om. Okay, so chanting mantra and specifically Om can be very good at stimulating this vagus nerve here. And it does so in a much more subtle way, okay, than, doing gross movements. And in the Yoga Sutras, it says that by chanting Om, you are going to remove obstacles from the spiritual path. Okay, and that sounds very esoteric and strange, right? Like, okay, sure, chanting Om, that's what, by magic it's gonna remove my obstacles? Well, if you think about it scientifically, it actually makes a lot of sense, because when you chant Om, you're stimulating this vagus nerve, which is stimulating the parasympathetic response, which means you're going to relax. And when you relax, you get out of your own way. You get out of your head, you stop kind of creating problems for yourself. The relaxed mind is much more efficient. So it really can actually remove obstacles from the spiritual path, because if you're not fighting against fear in your own head or anxiety or whatever thing might be going on, because if you're relaxed, you won't be doing those things, you really will advance further faster. So that's just an interesting note on one of the ways of stimulating the vagus nerve. And I want to look now at what other things does this vagus nerve do, and what do we do, what happens in the body when we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so when we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxing part of the nervous system, it's going to affect all the different organs of the body. The heart, it's going to decrease the heart rate and the vascular tone. It's going to regulate insulin secretion and create glucose homeostasis in the liver. In the gut, it's going to increase gastric juices, gut mobility, stomach acidity, so your digestion's going to work better. Inflammation, that other thing that we said was so important, it's going to suppress inflammation, which is going to allow you to be more pain-free. In the brain, it's going to help lower anxiety and depression. In the mouth, it'll start the first step in digestion, which happens in the mouth, the salivary response, so more saliva, blood vessels, decreasing vascular tone, lowering blood pressure. So all of these things, you can see that it's the vagus nerve. The proper functioning of the vagus nerve is going to affect all these different areas of the body, which have to deal with all the different systems of the body. So really, by being able to properly relax and have the proper functioning of the vagus nerve, it's going to be very beneficial to the global health. So moving on, okay, to finish, I just want to talk about the divisions of the central nervous system. So for the majority of this talk, we've been talking about the peripheral nervous system, which those are the nerves in the spinal cord. But now let's look at the central nervous system. Okay? Alright, we have the central nervous system, which is abbreviated as CNS. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is the system of the nerves, and that's divided into sensory and motor, and then it's divided into somatic and autonomic. Okay, the somatic is voluntary muscle movement. Autonomic is things that happen without non-voluntarily, and so the somatic division, that's like, okay, I want to move my arm, and I can move my arm. That's possible because the brain works through the peripheral nervous system, sending those messages into the motor division, which goes to the somatic division, which sends electrical impulse from my brain to my arm to be able to move. Okay? Or on the opposite of that, if there's put my hand on a hot stove and I am getting burnt, I have the ability, the reflex to move my hand away, thanks to the somatic division. Then there's the autonomic nervous system, which this is non-voluntarily. This is things like my heart beats, my lungs inflate and deflate. These are things I don't have to consciously tell myself. I don't have to say heart beat and then my heart beats. I don't have to say lungs inflate and they inflate. No, it just happens automatically. And that's the autonomic nervous system, which is divided further into the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is the sun part of this nervous system. It sends stress messages to the body, and stress sounds like a bad thing here, but it's not necessarily stress in that kind of the meaning. It's more like activating, everything activating. I wake up in the morning and I have lots of energy. That's because my sympathetic nervous system is in full working order. And then parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. It relaxes the body. It's what allows us to recuperate. Yeah, so it's like the sympathetic nervous system. If we were talking about pedals of a car, the sympathetic nervous system is the gas pedal and the parasympathetic nervous system is the brake. So go and stop. Boom. both are equally important, and making sure I arrive safely to wherever I'm going, right? We need both the gas pedal to go and also the brake pedal to not crash into something. So, in yogic terms, we can think of the sympathetic nervous system as the sun, the pingala. We'll talk about this when we do talk about energetic anatomy, but just to kind of preface this, the sunny part of us that activates energy, and this is the moon. Parasympathetic nervous system is the moon. It's everything that relaxes. It's Ida nadi, so lunar energy, relaxing energy, and we will talk more about that when we talk about the energetic system next time. Okay, so I know that's kind of a lot of information all at once, but I hope that it was a bit more clear to you. And in your manual, you have that chart that shows the different spinal nerve connections, so you can always refer to that. And I hope that you're as excited as I am about this topic, as I just think it's very, very fascinating. And I think it's even more fascinating that the ancient yogis were able to really realize all of this just through meditation. So we'll end today meditating on that.